Angelina Jolie. Angie and her kids were everywhere at the Toronto Film Festival, helping promote her new Netflix film, First They Killed My Father, and now Angelina is pulling no punches about life after splitting from Brad.
For a decade, the world watched the fallout of Hollywood's most explosive divorce, believing the dust had finally settled. But behind closed doors, something else was quietly brewing. In 2026, Angelina Jolie's children have made shocking moves that no one saw coming. Away from the flashing lights of the paparazzi, these 6 siblings are rewriting their destinies and exposing the shadows of a fractured family legacy. When we think of Hollywood stars, we tend to picture a grand, cinematic life with red carpets, carefully curated public relations statements, and exclusive interviews designed to build an image. We assume that when a dynasty crumbles, the definitive blows will be caught in the glare of camera flashes. But history, especially the history of the legendary Jolie Pitt family, has an interesting way of changing direction. To understand the reality of where these 6 globally recognized siblings stand in 2026, we have to look past the glitz and glamour and set aside the looming shadow of their father, Brad Pitt. 6 of the most famous children on the planet chose the machinery of the California legal system to launch a coordinated war for their own identity. It signals a complete and total erasure of a father's legacy, executed by a generation of young adults who spent their entire childhoods being treated like media accessories or high-stakes chess pieces in a toxic custody battle. Now they are autonomous agents taking control. This silent uprising was a slow burn that required years of patience before the legal actions could be self-funded and filed. The public often bought into the narrative spun by pricey crisis management teams, but the 2026 paper trail deflates those myths entirely. To truly understand how this unprecedented family rebellion came to be, we have to take a close look at the foundations of the modern House of Jolie. Long before the lawsuits and courthouse warfare, there was a single moment that set this entire domino effect into motion. Let's rewind all the way to the start of the millennium, long before the name Pitt was ever spoken in the same breath as Angelina Jolie's, and look at the fateful arrival of a single child who changed everything. Maddox Chivon. In 2002, an era of Hollywood very different from the one we know today, the iconic humanitarian and Oscar winner Angelina Jolie was a figure frequently misunderstood by the mainstream media, painted as a wild, unpredictable rebel of cinema. But beyond the red carpet, something profound was calling to her from halfway across the world. A visit to Cambodia, and everything changed. There, in an orphanage in Battambang, she locked eyes with a 7-month-old baby boy named Maddox Chivon, and in that quiet moment, her maternal instincts took over. However, fate dealt a challenging hand to this budding family dynamic. At the time, Angelina was famously married to eccentric actor Billy Bob Thornton, and the initial plan marketed to the public was a joint adoption. But as the reality of true responsibility got close, that illusion caved in as Billy Bob Thornton unexpectedly backed out of the agreement, leaving Angelina to handle the complex international paperwork entirely on her own. It was an early lesson for the young mother, but by March 2002, Angelina had finalized the adoption of Maddox against all odds. Just 14 months later, in May 2003, and the ink on her divorce from Billy Bob Thornton was already dry. Maddox became her priority, and any relationship that got in the way was disposable. For a brief window, it was just the two of them against the world, a single mother and her Cambodian prince. Maddox became her constant companion, going with her to remote film sets and humanitarian missions. Angelina was constructing a brand new legacy from scratch. She had proved she didn't need a partner to build a home, nor did she need permission from Hollywood to redefine what a modern family looked like. But just as the world began to adjust to this independent duo, an unprecedented twist of fate was waiting in the wings. The mid-2000s brought Brad Pitt into Angelina's orbit. He was the Hollywood golden boy, and by early 2006, their high-profile union wasn't just gossip for the tabloids, it had become a formalized legal entity. In a quiet Santa Monica courthouse, Brad Pitt officially signed the papers to adopt both Maddox and Zahara legally, setting the stage for creating the world's most photographed multicultural family. On the pages of fashion magazines, the public was fed an image of effortless domestic bliss. But beneath that polished image, a far different dynamic was playing out, and it would eventually turn into one of history's most unyielding custody battles. By early 2006, the state of California officially changed the children's surnames to Jolie Pitt. The hyphenated name was supposed to be a symbol of unity, but it was actually just legal proof of these children's identities being tied to the commercial brand of Brangelina. Growing up behind tinted SUV windows and heavy security, the children learned very early on that public perception rarely matched their lived day-to-day existence. As the years continued, the weight of the Pitt name began feeling more like an emotional cage and less like a privilege. And no one felt this suffocating pressure more than the eldest son. But how did he cope with it? The oldest child, Maddox Chevan, was very close to his mother. And that closeness was built in those early years when it was just the two of them, before the Brangelina empire was even a thing. As he matured, this connection played out behind the scenes of Hollywood film sets, where Maddox worked side by side with Angelina, learning the art of production. But while the industry was expecting him to follow in his famous parents' footsteps, Maddox was quietly planning a very different career path altogether. In an unexpected move that stunned Hollywood insiders, he made the decision to trade movie studios for the quiet world of biotechnology and biochemistry at Yonsei University in South Korea. And just a few months later on the campus in Seoul, and we see a completely different side of the young man. Confronted by paparazzi sneaking onto the university grounds to press him for details about his fractured relationship with his father, Maddox remained unfazed, and his response that echoed around the world: "Whatever happens, happens." The 2020 global pandemic eventually disrupted his campus life and forced a leave of absence, but the mental shift had already become permanent. Maddox returned to Hollywood on his own terms, pivoting into independent filmmaking. But if the relationship with his father was so bad, why did he keep the name? For years, the public had believed Maddox's physical escape to South Korea had silenced the personal demons he'd wrestled with. But the truth was out in Los Angeles Superior Court by May 2026. Maddox filed a formal petition with the court to legally and permanently rebrand himself, officially changing his name to just Maddox Jolie on all his legal identity documents. For his professional film credits on Angelina's latest cinematic venture, Without Blood, he had already quietly dropped the hyphenation, billing himself purely as a Jolie. But the court documents made it a reality in the eyes of the law. Not only did Maddox change his name, officially removing Pitt from his identity documents, but he set a strong example for his younger siblings. He was the first one that could legally make the change, breaking the seal of the family's shared history. But how did the next brother deal with the suffocating weight of this legacy? Pax Thien. Born in November 2003 in Vietnam, Pax Thien's story began in isolation, abandoned as an infant at a Ho Chi Minh City hospital before being placed in the Tam Bin Protective Center orphanage. But destiny is a strange thing. In March 2007, Angelina Jolie changed his story, overcoming complex international single-parent laws necessitated by local regulations banning unmarried cohabiting couples from adopting jointly. Though Brad Pitt would add his name to the adoption papers in Los Angeles a year later, Pax's heart always remained with the mother who flew across the world for him. As he grew up under the suffocating lens of global paparazzi, Pax chose a radically different path from his Hollywood peers. Instead of chasing the shallow adulation of the silver screen, he established himself as a highly perceptive digital artist. But even in his art, Pax refused to rely on the currency of his famous last name. Insiders say he created art entirely anonymously under the guarded pseudonym MTO, and for years he was a ghost, a brilliant young creator moving silently behind the camera lens, taking pictures of the world while refusing to let the world take pictures of him. But a life forged in the crossfires of a traumatic public family fracture cannot remain peaceful forever. The night of July 29, 2024, began like any other hazy, sun-drenched twilight in Los Angeles. Still, it would end in a nightmare that exposed the frightening vulnerability of celebrity kids. At about 5:12 in the afternoon on Los Feliz Boulevard, reality hit the fragile peace of the Jolie household. Pax Thien was riding a powerful BMX-style e-bike without a helmet through heavy rush-hour traffic, approaching a red light. In a split second of miscalculation, he crashed directly into the back of a stationary car. The impact was catastrophic, sending him into the asphalt and triggering a frantic rush to the ICU with severe head trauma and debilitating hip pain. Eyewitness statements from Lola Cavalli, who was the first civilian to sprint toward the wreckage, described a scene of pure horror, reporting that Pax appeared completely lifeless as he lay on the hot ground, his mouth visibly filling with blood. While the internet erupted in a frenzy, the legal aftermath took an unexpected turn. Despite the severe nature of the accident and the lack of protective gear, the Los Angeles Police Department chose not to issue any citations to the young artist. Why? Because California's e-bike motor laws are notoriously complex. The regulations depend entirely on the bike's specific motor class, Class 1, 2, or 3. And because of the intricate legal definitions regarding top speeds and throttle capabilities, the LAPD found its hands tied in enforcing a standard citation. Thankfully, Pax would eventually stabilize and go on to make a full recovery, fiercely guarded by his mother and siblings who rallied around his hospital bed. But this near-death experience reminded the entire family that their time together was precious and limited. Zahara Marley. In 2005, a tiny, fragile soul joined the House of Jolie, setting the stage for a remarkable journey of survival and triumph. Born in Awassa, Ethiopia, as Yemsrak, the infant Zahara Marley faced a heart-wrenching beginning. At just 6 months old, she was suffering from severe, life-threatening malnutrition and dehydration. But then, in a magnificent twist of fate, Angelina Jolie stepped forward to adopt her, raising the fragile infant in a fortress of love and care. The child who nearly succumbed to dehydration in an Ethiopian clinic did not just survive. She grew into a brilliant, fiercely independent young woman far from the suffocating city of California. As she matured, Zahara developed a sharp creative eye, launching her own philanthropic jewelry design lines to give back to the global communities that mirrored her origins. She refused to be a mere bystander in the theater of celebrity, quietly building her own financial and artistic autonomy. Then she made the definitive choice to pursue an elite education at Spelman College, a historically black university in Atlanta, Georgia. The transition was bittersweet for Angelina, as it marked the first time the tight-knit nest would truly begin to scatter. And just like that, the tearful, malnourished child of the past was gone, replaced by a confident leader standing proudly among her peers. This set the perfect stage for a public declaration that would send shockwaves straight back to Los Angeles. Surrounded by her new sisters in Atlanta, Zahara wasn't just going to make a name for herself on her college campus. She was preparing to strike the first highly publicized blow against her father's legacy. choosing a crowded room to utter the words that would change her public identity. But how did she handle the inevitable fallout of stepping away from the Pitt name? In a leaked video from the campus of Spelman College in November 2023, standing proudly before a roaring crowd during her Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority induction ceremony, 21-year-old Zahara stepped up to the microphone and loudly declared to the world, "My name is Zahara Marley Jolie." The deliberate omission of the name Pitt sent instant shockwaves through the entertainment industry. For years, Brad Pitt's expensive PR team painted a picture of a doting, hopeful father working quietly behind the scenes, repeatedly issuing statements claiming he felt nothing but deep pride for his children's accomplishments. Yet, Zahara's refusal to use his name in public completely destroyed that narrative, exposing the reality of an unresolved family divide. But while the public assumed the sorority video was simply a symbolic gesture of teenage rebellion, Zahara was quietly preparing to back up her words with legal action. She didn't just drop the name on a stage in Atlanta. She took her grievances straight to a California courtroom. In June 2026, official court records revealed that Zahara had finally finished the extensive legal paperwork. Moving with the same quiet precision as her brother Maddox, she formally signed a court petition to legally erase Pitt from her identity once and for all. The Los Angeles Superior Court has officially set her formal name change hearing for September 28, 2026. Now, while Zahara's public name drop was the first to go viral online, she was far from the only sibling ready to weaponize the legal system for her independence. In fact, the biological firstborn of the family, a child whose very birth was treated like a global historical event, was quietly preparing an even more shocking move of her own. Shiloh Nouvelle. The world had quite literally never seen anything like the media storm that surrounded the birth of Shiloh Nouvelle Jolie Pitt in May 2006. Born in the secluded coastal town of Swakopmund, Namibia, her birth required complex security protocols, including a government-mandated no-fly zone and a ring of private bodyguards to shield the makeshift hospital room from paparazzi. Her very first baby photos were sold for a record-breaking $4.1 million, proving that before she could even look at her own reflection, her identity had already been heavily commercialized by the global entertainment industry. But while Shiloh was blessed with a striking, undeniable blend of both her parents' elite Hollywood aesthetics, she rapidly grew into a fiercely independent spirit who refused to conform to anyone's expectations. From a very young age, she effortlessly rewrote the rules of celebrity childhood. In an era where the mainstream media demanded rigid societal expectations and traditional gender norms from young girls, Angelina completely championed Shiloh's freedom to choose her own wardrobe, her own haircuts, and her own path. Instead of trying to mold her into a plastic Hollywood princess, Shiloh was allowed to be an authentic creator. And as she grew, that raw, creative energy found its ultimate outlet not on a movie set, but in the rhythm-driven world of urban street dance. By the time Shiloh reached her teens, video clips of her practicing in elite Los Angeles studios began exploding across the internet, catching the world's attention. This was proof that Shiloh didn't need the validation of her family name to build a global audience. Her art spoke entirely for itself. Her dance videos garnered millions of views from fans who didn't care about the Brangelina legacy, but simply respected her undeniable skill. But while the public adored her artistic expression, Shiloh was busy using that newfound independence to plan her next big move. She was approaching a massive personal milestone. She was about to become a legal adult. And as her 18th birthday loomed on the horizon, she was preparing a tactical strike that would completely redefine her relationship with her father's legacy. Most teenagers celebrate turning 18 by partying or something similar, but Shiloh was different. May 27, 2024, was supposed to be a milestone celebration for the biological firstborn of the Jolie Pitt dynasty, a day marking her official entry into legal adulthood. But Shiloh Nouvelle had no intention of celebrating with a typical Hollywood party. Instead, she chose that exact date to do something that caught the entire entertainment industry completely off guard. The very moment she turned 18, Shiloh legally filed a petition with the Los Angeles Superior Court to permanently and officially drop Pitt from her surname. By choosing her exact 18th birthday, Shiloh ensured she was acting entirely as an autonomous adult in the eyes of the law, bypassing her mother's existing legal framework. This brilliant maneuvering completely insulated her from any future public relations smear campaigns that might accuse Angelina of orchestrating parental alienation or manipulating her children behind the scenes. But the genius of this move goes even deeper. Shiloh completely self-funded the entire operation, hiring her own independent attorney, Peter Levine, using her personal dance and modeling earnings to launch the legal strike. She didn't touch a single dime of her mother's massive fortune, nor did she rely on the family's long-term legal teams. Every dollar spent to sever her ties to Brad Pitt came from her own sweat, equity, and artistic labor. It was a flawless move that left the public with no way to spin the narrative. Yet, California law has an incredibly bizarre, archaic loophole that forces even the most private family dynamics into the public domain. Under California legal statutes, anyone petitioning for a formal name change must publish the legal request in a widely circulated newspaper for 4 consecutive weeks before a judge can officially sign off on it. It's quite ironic. A teenager whose entire childhood was fiercely guarded from the public eye was legally forced to print her private family affairs in the classified print section right next to local real estate listings and estate sales. But while Shiloh's birthday ultimatum made front-page news across the globe, her younger brother was watching the entire collapse of his father's legacy from a completely different vantage point, one shrouded in mystery. How does the youngest son of the most photographed couple in human history manage to become a total ghost in the age of digital surveillance? Knox Leon. The story of the youngest boy in the Jolie lineage begins in the sun-drenched, heavily guarded coastal city of Nice, France, in July 2008. From the very second he took his first breath alongside his twin sister, Vivienne Marcheline, Knox Leon was a prize that the global media machine was desperate to capture. In fact, his very first infant photographs commanded a staggering, record-breaking $14 million charity photo bounty, the most expensive celebrity images ever sold in human history. The world was utterly obsessed. Yet, despite the astronomical price tag placed on his existence before he could even crawl, Knox would grow up to make a definitive choice that baffled Hollywood insiders. He chose to remain entirely out of the media spotlight. While his older siblings navigated their way through the public eye with viral dance videos, high-profile university selections, and courtroom battles, Knox became the enigma of the litter. He watched his family being torn apart by a never-ending custody fight, but even so, he would not allow the public a glimpse of his private life. He moves like a ghost in the family infrastructure, deeply protected by his mother and fiercely loyal to his siblings, all the while observing a code of total, absolute silence. Documenting his rare public sightings has become an obsession for modern pop culture sleuths. On the rare occasions he does step past the security cordons, such as a low-key, ordinary coffee run on the streets of Los Angeles alongside his siblings, the internet goes into an absolute meltdown. You may be wondering why him and not his siblings too. Well, my dear viewer, his striking physical resemblance to both of his iconic parents is completely stunning. Fans are routinely transfixed by how effortlessly he mirrors Brad Pitt's youthful facial structure while carrying Angelina's intense, piercing gaze. Yet, he treats the flashing lenses not with anger, but with a cool, detached indifference that makes him even more fascinating. And even more so when you consider his successful disappearance from the prying eyes of Hollywood. But in June 2026, the quietest sibling spoke up in the most unlikely way possible. Weeks before turning 18, Knox stepped up to the podium at his high school graduation at Fusion Academy in Los Angeles and shocked the audience with an announcement. Shedding the shy persona, he told the gathered crowd that he was going to step into the ring that night for a Muay Thai exhibition at an event called Total Sonic Knockout 5, receiving massive cheers from his classmates and a fiercely proud Angelina Jolie, who was seen taking photos from the audience. Later that night, Knox swapped his cap and gown for fight gear and gloves, displaying a remarkable athleticism developed through years of hard, focused training. Throwing heavy jabs and kicks under the club lights, onlookers couldn't help but make an immediate comparison to his father's iconic bare-knuckle combat imagery from the cinematic classic Fight Club over 25 years ago. But the biggest shock didn't come in the ring. It came with his high school diploma. Insiders revealed that his official graduation documents completely omitted the name Pitt from his surname, with his certificate listing him simply as Knox Jolie. In the age of social media, smartphone cameras, and a paparazzi industry that's never satisfied, a child worth millions to the tabloids managed to remain a total ghost for nearly 20 years. Knox proved that under the most suffocating social conditions on Earth, there is still a choice of privacy. He saw his family legacy go up in flames and chose to make silence his last line of defense. But where Knox had perfected the art of secrecy, his twin sister was busy planning to take a completely different path, one that would catapult her straight into the heart of the spotlight as a brilliant, behind-the-scenes artistic prodigy. Vivienne Marcheline. The world's first real glimpse of Vivienne Marcheline on a cinema screen was born completely out of necessity. Back in 2014, on the dark, gothic sets of Disney's Maleficent, every single child actor hired for the production froze in absolute terror at the sight of Angelina Jolie with her towering horns, razor-sharp cheekbones, and piercing contacts. The only child on Earth who wouldn't scream bloody murder at the sight of the villain was her own 5-year-old daughter, Vivienne. But while that early appearance looked like the standard opening act for a Hollywood legacy kid, Vivienne had absolutely no interest in riding the coattails of her family's screen acting royalty. Instead, she underwent a massive evolution, transitioning from a shy child actor into a sharp, eagle-eyed Gen Z theater scout who would completely reshape the landscape of modern Broadway. And Vivienne wasn't a lazy Nepo baby. She didn't just have a title handed to her. She earned her stripes working behind the scenes alongside her mother as a volunteer production assistant, an independent artistic 15-year-old who single-handedly changed theatrical history. It was actually Vivienne who originally discovered a small-scale regional theater production of The Outsiders down in La Jolla, California. Blown away by the raw emotional depth of the adaptation, she didn't just tell her mother it was a good show, she passionately pushed Angelina to see it, championing the project until she convinced her mother to step up, partner with her, and buy the core producing rights to bring it to the global stage. As co-producer of a show that swept up an astounding 4 Tony Awards, including Best Musical, she was at the heart of the theatrical universe. Vivienne became a triumphant force of creativity, bringing a whole new generation to life on Broadway. Her keen instinct had paid off on the biggest scale imaginable, and her artistic vision was utterly undeniable. But as the world celebrated this teenage prodigy's historic Broadway triumph, eagle-eyed theatergoers noticed a quiet, devastating detail tucked inside the official show programs. A detail that proved Vivienne, just like her twin brother and older siblings, was quietly calculating her own disconnection from her father's legacy. Theatergoers noticed a big change in the official playbill program for The Outsiders right away. Vivienne, 15, had decided to drop Pitt from her name. She decided to go by Vivian Jolie for her professional career instead of using her famous hyphenated legal last name. That subtle but powerful omission was not simply a stylistic choice, but a powerful public statement of her intent to forge her own identity. Vivian was deliberately stepping out of her father's shadow along with her older siblings, trying to make her own way in the world and in her career. A new chapter in her life and career, away from the weight of her family's fame. We are looking at a total paradigm shift in culture in 2026. The mass metamorphosis of the Jolie children into full-on, self-governing, independent adults is a masterclass in contemporary self-reclamation like no other. From the sterile biochemistry labs of Seoul's Yonsei University to the high-energy hip-hop dance studios of Los Angeles, and all the way to the prestigious, historic halls of Atlanta's Spelman College, these 6 people have systematically reclaimed their identities entirely on their own terms. The global media gave them a pre-written script, but they chose to burn the script and write their own. They have managed to deconstruct the commercialized Angelina brand that controlled the early years of their lives, turning a manufactured public identity into personal, proven accomplishments. When we step back and take a sweeping philosophical look at this multi-decade saga, we are forced to confront the true, staggering cost of Hollywood fame. For a generation, their childhood was treated like public property, their family dynamic dissected by millions who only knew them through a relentless paparazzi lens. Yet, they found a way to make it out of the celebrity matrix. Instead of succumbing to the toxic cycle of public mudslinging, they withdrew behind a wall of privacy, allowing their achievements to speak for them. After a decade spent in the crossfires of history's most toxic divorce, the kids have spoken without ever giving a single messy interview. Their silence is their loudest statement. They didn't choose the glamorous path of tabloid revenge or tell-all memoirs. Instead, they chose the California legal system and the quiet power of personal excellence. They have proven that a legacy is not something to be inherited through a contract, but something built through sweat and effort. Now that the children have dropped Pitt's name entirely, what are your thoughts on how they chose to handle their family legacy? Do you think this total legal erasure was a necessary step for their personal healing, or do you feel the divide could have been handled differently? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out the one on your screen now. Thanks for watching.